We will break for the lunch now.
Our first topic, documentation for e-commerce or social networking websites, an unstructured documentation approach by Mayur Madhav Bhandarkar from TIPCO Pune. Uh, Mayur Bhandarkar has about 8 years experience in technical writing. He has experience in content writing and instructional designer. I'll hand over the mic to.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Yes. Yeah, good afternoon everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. My name is Mayur Bhandarkar and I'm a senior technical writer with TIPCO Software. I have 8 plus years of experience. So the topic that I'll be presenting today is documentation for e-commerce and social media websites. How they implement documentation with an unstructured approach. So we'll move to the agenda immediately. So we have a perfect 10-point agenda. I'll not mention all the points right now, so anyhow I'll be introducing each of the topic as and when we go on. So we move on to the first point in the agenda, which is impact of e-commerce and social media websites. How many of you recognize the icons over here? Most of them. Okay. Another question. How many of you recognize all the icons over here? All? Okay. So I think the one you might not be recognizing would be Tibber. Tibber is an enterprise social networking website. It is a TIPCO product. It is for TIPCO employees and TIPCO customers to meet on a platform to discuss the products or discuss solutions or discuss any problems, things like that. Okay, so this itself, with the exception of Tibber, when you said that you can recognize all the icons over here, this itself is a clear indication as to how e-commerce and social media websites have penetrated our daily lives. Now the main question that comes up over here is, the main question that comes up over here is, why is documentation needed? How many of you actually use the documentation for Facebook or for any e-commerce website? Yeah, very few. So then in that case, we always have to ask this question, why is documentation needed? One, for social media websites and for e-commerce, it's a diverse audience. We may be tech savvy. We may know what a shopping cart is. I mean, it's not spelled out on these sites. It's just a cart. We know what it is, but it's not necessary that a new user knows it. So he may need some assistance. And the diverse audience means for social media websites you have users who are from an age group of 10 to 80. And for e-commerce websites also you can say you have users who are teenagers, but it would be much safer to say an audience of 18 and above. So because of this diverse audience, you can say that we can make it obvious that yes, documentation is needed. There are things which is not that easily understandable because of the diverse audience. Now, I have a few more questions. How many of you feel the user interface for Google, Facebook, Amazon or Flipkart is intuitive? I mean, how many of you feel that the user interface is intuitive? You can understand the user interface. How many of you use the help section? I'm going to ask this question again. How many of you use the help section for these websites? Okay, now how many of you know that there is a help section for this? So I rest my case. If there is a user if the user interface is intuitive, then you should not need a help section. And if there is a help section, which means there's somebody who is using it. Now, our next point in the agenda is documentation solutions, structured versus unstructured. I'll just give you a comparison of the structured versus unstructured documentation. Now structured documentation. Now the perspective over here that I'm using is someone who's moved from structured documentation, who's been doing structured documentation for a long time, he's making a leap to unstructured documentation, or someone who's doing product-based documentation is suddenly making a leap to e-commerce companies or social media companies. So how does he have to adapt to when he makes this move? Table of contents. Now when I worked in a startup, when I made this move, I always had that table of contents in my mind. How do I structure this? Where does this content fit in? I mean, we always place high emphasis on the table of contents because we are creating a PDF or we are creating an online help. So for us, for people who work on structured documents, a table of contents or a TOC is very essential. For unstructured, it's not essential. But that doesn't mean that you don't have, people don't use it. People do create it, but it's not essential. The topic is placed in the TOC as per the flow of information. We all know that the topic, if there is a TOC and if there is a new topic that's being introduced, we see the flow and we place it over there. It's not necessary when it comes to unstructured documentation. Each topic is segregated based on the type of information that it provides. For data users, you know, CTR, concept, task, reference. For unstructured documentation, when you move on, when you work for an e-commerce or a social media company, it's a solution. Every topic is a solution. It does not matter if it involves steps, if it involves some procedures in it. If it does not matter, you're just giving an answer which does not have procedures in it. Every topic is a solution, so you don't have to segregate it based on whether you're providing a reference information or you're providing a procedural information or if you're providing a conceptual information. Information in most topics requires the knowledge of a dependent topic. Now that you're placing it in a flow, there are some topics which when you read it you feel you need to know the parent topic when it comes to structured documentation. As and when you look at the TOC, oh, I need to read something else before I just cannot directly read it. I need to read the parent topic. Now because everything over there is a solution, you don't need to know. It's just providing you a solution to your query. So there's no such thing as a parent topic or something over there. All features of the product need to be documented, and only, now when I mean only the frequently, even in that case, all the features are documented, but it's not necessary that it has to be documented the minute it's released. See, for this point, I'll come back later, but the prominence over there is what is the most frequently accessed, or what is the feature that the user is going to, the user is going to use frequently. So that has to be documented at the very beginning. It does not, see, what matters is if that has a high user, if that has a high user impact, you need to have that documented first. The language is formal. We have some language guidelines and all that, like MSTP, Chicago Style Manual. Over there, the language can be formal and the language can be casual or informal. It depends on the audience that you are writing it for. So we'll look at that later. The next point on our agenda is Google and its impact on unstructured documentation. I would like to say Google and its impact on our life in general. It does not have to be just for unstructured documentation. It can be for everything. We all know this page. We can just imagine what would happen if this page does not work for 24 hours. So that's the impact Google has on our daily lives. So now I'll just talk about it I'll just show you some results on how Google changed the landscape for online documentation. See, earlier when we just had print-based documentation, and when we realized the importance of online documentation, the move was just use the exact structure and make it online, which means it was a PDF that was online. Your online help was structured exactly like your PDF. It had a TOC, it had content, but that wasn't required. I mean, Google, if you have optimized your content, if you have used the right techniques, Google will help you find that topic when it's online. The best example would be when I worked for a popular e-commerce company somewhere in the year 2006. I saw one of my colleagues using Google to find the information on our e-commerce website. At that time, people were using their own search on their websites, which was not as useful, but when comparison to Google. People were using, my colleague itself, he was using certain keywords in a proper manner on Google to land on the perfect page, rather than using the search which was there on the e-commerce website. So that's about the impact of Google. Now, this is one example. What it mentions over here is problem signing in Amazon. That's what's written over there on the search. And look at the results. If you look at the results, the first three results are the first three results says Amazon.com help, about problem signing in, Amazon.com, customer discussion. It takes you to everything that is related to signing in. You have to use the right keywords, and it takes you to all the pages on Amazon. And it not only takes you to the Amazon help, it takes you to the customer discussion as well, the consumer discussions and all that. Similarly, another example for privacy settings on Facebook. This is another example, so how efficient Google is. Or it does not necessarily have to be about help. You want to find a product on Flipkart. Nowadays, almost all websites have a very good search. I'm just saying how the initial impact of how Google had. So look at this. It takes you to the landing page of that product if you're looking out for BlackBerry Q5 on Flipkart. And the final example. Now this is a complex search wherein we have used multiple parameters, like where I want to search for fulfillment order management, a product, on a site docs.tipco.com, and I want PDF results. Now on your support pages or on your documentation subdomains where you maintain all your documentation, you maintain PDFs as well as HTML help or online help. So you can use a combination of search parameters, and you can get the desired results on Google. Now, analyzing the target audience. Now, let me ask this question. Who do you think is the target audience for e-commerce websites? Buyers and sellers. Yeah. The primary target audience is always the buyer, and the secondary target audience are the sellers. Now, this is why in the comparison table that I had shown you earlier, I had mentioned the language can be formal and the language can be informal. Where do you think the informal language would be needed? Yeah, it helps with the buyers, because this is these are the people who need that kind of content, where the content has to speak to them. You just can't be too formal over here. They have a problem, they need a solution. So the content has to be informal over here, and the content is usually formal for the sellers. Sellers are mostly interested in solutions to problems like, I have 10,000 products that I need to upload on Flipkart. I'm not going to enter each product and click a submit button and then do it 10,000 times. I need to do it quickly. How do you have a solution for that? So those kinds of problems. Now, the primary target audience for social media websites. The primary target audience are the users who use the product. The secondary target audience are the developers. Now again, over here, the content has to be informal over here. You need this audience you need to use a proper, you need to be casual with the content over here, because you have to make them understand how Facebook works, or how you can manage your privacy settings, or how you can update your security settings. With Facebook or with any website for that matter, when the UI keeps changing frequently, you need this. This audience needs to know, because what happens is they always change the UI, and what used to be at one place earlier is now changed to make it more user friendly. But then people find it difficult to trace where it is, so they use the help section over there. So they have a problem, and for them you need to make them understand it in an informal language. Now look at that guy. He's very he's very angry. So for him, you just can't use flowery language and tell him, because he's more interested in using the APIs of Facebook. You can't use a flowery language like, oh, I'm sorry, you've faced this problem with our API and all that. Here is a solution. No, you just have to give him a solution. He's only interested in the solution. So that is similar to our structured documentation, where we don't use flowery language or we don't use polite language or something. We just give them a proper formal language. We give them a solution. Now, the next one is organizing the content. We all know Lord of the Rings and the quote in that, one ring to rule them all. Similarly, when you're creating all your topics, you have to place it in one folder, because that is how Google search is efficient. This is one of the parameters where if your Google search has to be efficient, do not make it a nested folder. You have to have folders for images, CSS and all the other artifacts, but not for topics. All topics have to be placed in one folder. Now, document relevant topics. I'll give you an example. Let's assume Facebook has released many features, and one of those features is like, but they have a short time span for a release. Do you think will they stop that release if the like button, if the content for the like button is not documented? No, they won't. They'll see which feature has high user impact. Like is intuitive, but like will be documented, but not immediately. They'll see which feature has high user impact. They'll tell you have to document those, and the ones which do not have high impact, you can document it a little later. Use analytics tools. Now, why do you think analytics tools are that? Why do you think people use analytic tools for your help section on Facebook or for e-commerce website or for your social media website? It is to see which topic is getting the highest hits. When you go to an e-commerce website, the most frequently used topic, most frequently asked questions, you see those.
Other users have also searched for this, relevant
Yeah.
topics.
That is done through analytics. Analytics gives you an idea as to which topics are being accessed frequently and which topics are not being accessed frequently. It gives you an idea as to what is it that the user is looking out for and what is it that he's not interested in. If you see an analytic where you have 100 topics, and out of that 10, let's say out of that 99 has 0 hits and one topic has 10,000 hits. So that it just tells you that your effort has been wasted. What the user needs, he's not getting it. Only one of them has helped him out actually. So analytics gives you an idea as to how to organize the content. What is it that the user is looking out? Highlight that. What is it the user is not looking out for? Keep that on your help section, but don't just highlight that. Maybe when he gets a solution immediately, when he comes to your help page and he sees, oh yeah, this is what I'm looking out for. He gets a solution immediately. So that's a good customer experience. Then related links. Some similar topics. You forgot your password. That's one topic. You want to change your password. Something similar. Link those. You have to link similar topics so that the user can even navigate to something that he's also interested in. Yeah, I want to change my password as well. I've forgotten my password, but no, it's not going to be like that. I've forgotten my password. I'm going to add that. But if I want to change my password in the future, how do I do that? You might have link those similar topics. And then provide option for feedback. This you might have seen nowadays. Every topic in the end, was this helpful to you? Yes or no? If yes, good. If no, what was it? What problems did you face? Make sure that your topics has this. Each and every topic that you've created should have this, because it gives you an idea whether the solution that you've provided has been helpful or not. I'll elaborate on this as and when we move further.
How effective is it? People actually enter in
They do.
I don't enter it myself, and I'm not seeing much.
See, that is where the diverse target, that is where the diverse audience comes into the picture. We as people who use it, because we don't check the help section a lot, but people who do and people who don't get a solution were really angry. I mean, I've read comments over there that have been,
Don't get the information at least, then
yeah. But those are important for us, right? So now FAQs, a successful approach. Why do you think FAQs work for these sites? If you visited the help section for these sites, you will see some of them have made it, some of them have taken out the FAQ approach, but some still maintain that. Why does it work? The main point is it has a human touch. It communicates. When you read that question, you feel like you're talking to someone. Yeah. So that content has to communicate with the user. So that's why FAQs always work. Then it's an informal mode of communication. As I said, when it's informal. I mean, you're not facing a problem. You make that question very relevant. You must feel that the customer is going through that problem. So that informal communication also has an impact and that's why FAQs are relevant. Then the problem solution model. The best thing about FAQ, you have a problem and it provides a solution. That's it. That is why when I said it's not dependent on your previous topic. Now one FAQ, the way people ask you to write it is when he has a problem, you have to give him the solution for that FAQ. You have to give him the solution in that question itself. And then users see effort. The one who's using, the one who's accessing your FAQ, and if it's a detailed FAQ, and if it is communicating in the right way, the one who's accessing your FAQ will see your effort over there. The effort that you have put in to give him a solution. Now if it's a lengthy procedure and if he's made it very accurate, where he's covered all the points, then me as a user, I feel, oh yeah, this guy has put in an effort to give me a solution. Let me go through it completely and let me see, let me get to my solution. So users see your effort over there when you've given a proper solution to that. And then request user feedback. Again over here, even with your FAQs, request user feedback. It's the same thing over here. Yes?
But FAQs are not always FAQs.
Huh? FAQs are not always FAQs.
Yeah, because when we document FAQs, we imagine that users may ask this kind of questions and document. Most of them, they are really not frequently asked questions.
Can you give me an example for that? I mean, what do you think is not a frequently asked question?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Most of the times, FAQs are like documented before it is like properly before we get feedback from the customers or audience or whoever maybe.
Yeah.
So they are not exactly, many times they are not exactly frequently asked questions.
Okay.
They're imagined like.
Yeah. Yeah. When you mentioned pilot, okay. I'll just move away from what I was discussing. When it comes to e-commerce and Facebook, they have different stages before it reaches the customer. I mean, we have it for structured documentation as well. There is a UAT stage, and then there is there's an audience wherein you pick 50 people from different age groups and all that, sample audience. They use that, and then they find out whether they ask them to go through the documentation as well, and then they get their feedback. And if something is missing, then they document it over here. Anyhow, this section has been created for that. If it's not a frequently asked question, then let your customer help you out with what is missing over there. Let him provide feedback. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Application or with the documentation, because it means that we already know there is a problem, but we haven't addressed it, and the documentation too doesn't address the problem.
I put it this way. It's not a problem. It's something that he's not been able to figure out. See, what is I am facing problem logging in. If you create an FAQ like that, then you give him a solution, which means there's no problem with the system. But these might be a few of the doubts which users might encounter. So you create an FAQ for that and then you publish it.
My question is, why do we need to create a FAQ when we can provide that kind of information right in the UI, or our documentation can address it very clearly?
Yeah, as I said, FAQs have a human touch. See, when you write your FAQs, my way of looking at it is, you have to write an FAQ. Your content has to be so good that it has to sound like a CSR rather than an IVR. I'm sorry, I just have 10 minutes. I'll go through the session.
No, I just have, maybe this will make it clear, as in on Flipkart and all, when you're looking for how to return your products, I found the FAQs to be very helpful, and that will never be, it's not intuitive from the user interface, right? So you need an FAQ for that, for something like that.
Okay, I just have 10 minutes. I'll just rush through this. Leveraging user feedback. Now, this is what, when you asked a doubt, why do you actually leverage user feedback? The first thing, when you use that feedback, was that solution effective or not? So you get an idea when if a user says yes, okay, it was good, but it's not just one user. How many of them said no? That's also important. So you find out from the user whether that information was helpful or not, and then you modify the provided solution. Based on the feedback, you modify the provided solution. What many of them have started doing is, below each topic, they provide an administrator moderated forums as well, wherein people are discussing it. Now when people are discussing it, let's assume you've given a solution. Now you've written it in a way that someone did not find it helpful. Now there is an administrator moderated forum over there. So somebody provided a solution, and then you found that there were 4 more replies saying that, oh yes, I understood what you've written, but not what the topic provided. I mean, he wrote it in a different way, and people were able to understand that. So those forums actually help you out. How does it help you out? You can now leverage that content, polish it, leverage that content, and update the solution for the topic. And do you have to worry? No, because there are no legal hassles on user generated content on those forums. Keywords and web page retention strategies. Whenever you're creating a topic, highlight your keywords, highlight relevant keywords for those topics so that it can be identified by Google. I'm going to go quickly now because I have a lot of slides. So highlight the relevant keywords so that when if there is a Google search performed on if there is Google search performed for that particular topic, that those topics rank higher on the search. And then the other thing that is needed is for your content to rank higher on Google is worship originality. Don't copy paste content. Like login issues can be similar for many websites. So just don't copy paste content because you feel that the solution is effective over there. So create original content and then familiarize yourselves with strategies. And what strategies are those? SEO strategies, like giving a good page title, then using that within your meta description, making sure that the keywords are repeated at least 4 times in your body tag, and then all those SEO strategies which you need to perform to get your page a higher ranking. Familiarize yourself with those strategies. Accept good and reject bad. There are 2 types of SEO strategies: black hat, black hat and white hat. You can perform black hat, but after a certain point of time, Google is going to sandbox it. So accept the good ones and reject the bad ones. And now web page retention strategies. Okay, I'll give you an example on this. I don't have an e-commerce or a social media based example, but I'll just give you an example so that you understand what is the web page retention strategy. You're using Adobe Technical Communication Suite. you are looking out for a solution which is for a version 9, but something happened and you ended up at a page which talks about the same solution but for version 10. You were looking out for version 9, but you landed up on 10. So now, what does page retention say? Oh, that's bad. What has happened over here is it's bad user experience. He should have landed on the right page. But then you have to make sure that if he still landed on the wrong page, despite having all those SEO activities and everything done, you should at least make sure that he doesn't leave your page now. He has to be on that page and you have to guide him to the right content. Now, in what Adobe does is, they have a section right at the bottom which says, were you looking out for were you looking out for modifying this feature on Adobe Technical Communication 10.9, a previous version and a later version. So then you know that he was looking out for that information, but it was a wrong version. That's it. So you're not giving a bad customer experience. You're just enhancing it by taking him to the right content without leaving that web page. So assists user to the right information, useful for websites with repeated information, as I said, involves linking similar and dependent content. This also implements user feedback. The user feedback over here would not be whether this was helpful or not. The user feedback over here is what were the parameters that you used to land here, and what exactly were you looking out for. So the feedback is a bit different over here, and involves proper collaboration, because for websites that have lot of content, you just can't link everything that you think is similar. You have to link something which actually are similar and which will help your web page retention strategies. Okay, so I'll just run through some examples. This is our Tibber help. This is our Tibber screen. Look at the help provided by Tibber. They've given a run through of the entire UI over here. Because of time constraints, I'm just going to show you how a few people have organized their content. So this is how it goes in Tibber. They have highlighted the user interface and they have provided the solution over there as to what it actually does. Now look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is that confident about their information organization. They just have 5 topics. This is a landing page. They just have 5 topics which says popular answers, and they have a search bar. That's it. They are that confident about their content organization and their help. And I have seen, when I have searched for topics, I've always have found results for almost everything on LinkedIn. This is how they organize. And then they have help forum results. Now the second tab is for help forum, or discussions that are going on their help. And then they have welcome to safety center. This is for the safety center. And then they have, this is where they take the user feedback. This is helpful if you feel that you found something, there is something on LinkedIn which has not been documented, you can just provide your feedback over here and submit it. Then now for e-commerce websites, as I said, the popular ones have been organized. Just a few examples to show you. And this is for Amazon, and this is for Flipkart. Again, they have FAQs over there. How do I look at that? So they're written in FAQs. Okay, I'll run through this very quickly. Expectation from writers. For someone who is moving from structured documentation to this, there are a few unlearning mantras. Table of contents is a myth. Don't always think of table of contents. Just concentrate on providing the solution. Formal language is for zombies. I mean, when most of the help is usually written for the primary audience. So start writing some flowery language or marketing kind of language so that you can sell your content. And then solution only for relevant topics, as I mentioned earlier. Functional specification is for nerds. When I've worked, see, what happens is you are the dumb audience for them. I mean, that's the term that they use. They want someone, the engineers or the development team, they consider the documentation, the person who's doing the documentation and the word that they use over there is dumb audience. You are the dumb audience for us. You use our product and you figure out what is it that you found difficult or what is it that you did not understand and let us know. then we'll improve it. So you are the dumb audience for them. You won't get functional specifications over there, okay, unless you are documenting API, unless you are writing about API documentation. In that case, yes. But for majority of the time, when it comes to user interface or when it comes to using the software, you're not going to get that. They're going to ask you to use it and then document your queries. And information flow, okay, information flow does not necessarily mean success. Because it's solution based, they're not going to worry about the information flow. They just want you to provide a solution. And finally, the learning mantras: create effective FAQs, identify relevant keywords, familiarize yourself with search engine optimization, page retention strategies that I mentioned, and the product you're documenting, which is always obvious. You have to know the product that you're documenting. And finally, in closing, this is my quote: "To structure is human, but unstructured is divine." Thank you. Yes.
Thanks, Mayur. If you have any questions, please take it offline. We already have very running out of time for the next session. So that was an interesting presentation after lunch by Mayur. On behalf of STC, we would like to thank Mayur for presenting a moment. I'll call upon Mugdha to present it to Mayur.
Wait. You have to come here because otherwise your team will follow.
Can we have Namrata here? Some problem with starting the next session. I'll get back to you in 2 minutes.